A young woman came to visit her parents for the weekend and disappeared without a trace. The police and dozens of local residents quickly joined the search, and soon they uncovered something quite unexpected. But when the whole truth finally came to light, the case sparked outrage that lasted for several years. Vanessa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in the small town of Leominster, Massachusetts. Her parents divorced soon after her birth, but Vanessa's father remained very involved in her life. He stayed in the same town and tried to spend as much time as possible with his daughter. From a young age, Vanessa developed a strong love for nature and sports, thanks to her father. They often went hiking, skied in the nearby mountains, and visited the ocean to enjoy the beach. Later on, Vanessa became passionate about yoga and jogging, even taking part in 2 major charity marathons. Vanessa was also dedicated to her education and aimed to build a successful career. After high school, she went to Boston University and earned a degree in communications. She worked at several local companies before landing her dream job at Google, which led her to move to New York City. Vanessa was excited about her new job and worked hard to move up in her career. Even with her busy schedule, she made time for charity, trying to help others. Vanessa also tried to visit her family as often as possible. They lived in a small town called Princeton, not far from her hometown, which was about 180 miles from New York. In early August 2016, when Vanessa was 27, she visited her family for the weekend and stayed at her mom's house. She spent time with relatives, caught up with friends, and planned to head back to New York on Sunday, August 7th. That morning, Vanessa spent some time at home with her mom, and in the afternoon, she decided to go for a jog. With a few hours left until her bus, she had plenty of time to enjoy her run. She decided to run along the road near her mother's house. Although there were a few other houses along the way, they were mostly hidden by dense trees. Vanessa was supposed to be back in about half an hour, but she never returned. Her mom started to worry, knowing Vanessa still had to pack and catch her bus. She tried calling her, but Vanessa didn't pick up. About an hour after she left the house, Vanessa's phone started going straight to voicemail, making her mom even more anxious. She kept trying to reach her daughter, but there was no response. Her last hope was that Vanessa might have decided to meet some friends or visit other family members before heading back to New York. Her mom contacted all their relatives, but none of them had seen Vanessa. Fearing something bad had happened to her daughter, she decided to call the police. Officers spoke with her mom and began searching along the route Vanessa was supposed to jog. Her relatives and friends quickly joined the search, hoping to find her safe and well. Vanessa's bus to New York was scheduled to leave at 5:30 p.m., and everyone hoped she would show up by then. But when the bus left without her, it became clear that something serious had happened. Vanessa was very responsible about her work and would never miss the last bus. The search went on for several hours. The local police department requested assistance from the state police, who sent several officers with search dogs. Vanessa's father actively participated in the search and was extremely distressed. At one point, the police even had to ask him to go home because his anxiety was disrupting the process. Around 8:20 p.m., one of the search teams headed deeper into the woods, less than a mile from Vanessa's mother's house. The dogs led the officers in a specific direction, and soon they discovered a human body on the ground. Despite numerous bruises, the police immediately realized it was Vanessa Marcotte. Her clothes were missing except for one sneaker lying near the crime scene. In addition to the bruises, there were clear signs of burns on her body, and the sneaker was also partially burned. The police thought that the perpetrator might have attempted to dispose of the body and evidence using fire, but failed. They also suspected that Vanessa had been assaulted, which could have been the motive for the unknown killer. Detectives noted that along with the victim's clothes, her headphones and smartphone were also missing. Since these items were not found anywhere near the body, the perpetrator might have taken them. The body was handed over to medical examiners while the police began searching for suspects. Residents of Princeton, who quickly learned about what had happened, were shocked and scared. Their small town was considered very safe, and the last murder had occurred over 30 years ago. Now, with the news of Vanessa's murder and the horrific details, the town plunged into panic. People feared that the killer might be one of their own and worried that he could strike again. Medical examiners determined that the cause of death was strangulation. Vanessa had also sustained numerous injuries, some indicating that she had tried to fight off her attacker. Skin particles were found under her nails, and DNA analysis revealed that they belonged to an unknown man. Investigators immediately entered his DNA profile into the FBI database, but no matches were found. Despite this, the DNA profile became their only major piece of evidence. Now, the police could compare DNA samples from suspects with this profile. They also knew that the attacker likely had fresh scratches on his body, which could help identify him more quickly. Regarding the burns on Vanessa's body, experts found traces of an accelerant and determined it was gasoline. It seemed like the perpetrator had tried to use it to destroy evidence and the body right after the murder. The medical examiners couldn't conclusively determine if Vanessa had been sexually assaulted, but detectives continued to consider it a primary motive. They also didn't rule out the possibility that the attacker might have known the victim and had personal motives. Detectives put all their efforts into finding the perpetrator and turned to the local community for help. With Princeton's population of just 3,000, many residents knew each other, so the police hoped someone might have crucial information. They also asked people to be on the lookout for a man with fresh scratches, and soon, their efforts paid off. A witness came forward, saying he had been driving along the road on the day of the murder around 12:45 p.m. He saw a dark SUV with the hood up on the roadside and a Latino man standing next to it. The man was of medium height and solid build, appearing to be between 20 and 30 years old. The witness didn't recall any other details since he had driven by at high speed. The only detail he could provide was that the man had short hair or a completely shaved head. An hour and a half later, the witness drove back along the same road and noticed the SUV was still there. This time, the hood was down, all the windows were closed, and the man was nowhere to be seen. The witness added that he hadn't thought much of it at the time, but after hearing about Vanessa's murder, he realized he might have seen the perpetrator. Another witness reported seeing Vanessa that day as she headed toward the road. According to him, a car was following her. The driver first passed by, then turned around and started following her again. Unfortunately, the witness couldn't see the license plate or remember any other details about the car. Soon, detectives received another lead. A witness working at a ski resort 10 minutes drive from Princeton noticed a suspicious man with a scratched face. This man was caught on surveillance camera, and the witness provided the footage to the police. Thanks to the footage, they quickly identified the man and began investigating his possible involvement, but soon concluded that he was likely not the killer. A DNA analysis later confirmed this, and the man was cleared of suspicion. Over the next few weeks, police received more than 1,000 tips, some of which seemed very promising. They diligently checked each one, but repeatedly hit dead ends, failing to get any closer to catching the culprit. Detectives investigated local residents as well as people from other towns. They also looked into owners of dark SUVs, but none of these efforts yielded results. Vanessa's family couldn't sit still and wanted to contribute to the investigation. They put up flyers with information about the case in nearby towns and launched a website with all the details about the case. Despite the large number of tips and the community's involvement, with each passing week, investigators grew more and more discouraged. They had checked hundreds of men in the area and looked into Vanessa's acquaintances, but each lead ended up going nowhere. Several FBI profilers studied the case and concluded that the person who killed Vanessa most likely didn't know her and committed the crime spontaneously. They suggested that he might have driven by, seen Vanessa, and decided to assault her. They also noted that the perpetrator was likely living in Princeton or nearby towns, or regularly visiting Princeton, possibly to see relatives or for work. Given the brutality of the attack, the profilers speculated that the killer might be a sociopath, making him harder to identify. Sociopaths not only lack guilt, but are also skilled liars. The murderer could have acted completely normal after the crime, as if nothing had happened, and avoided drawing attention to himself. In the following months, the case made little progress, even though the local police department continued to work diligently on it. However, the more leads they followed, the less likely it seemed that they would be able to identify the perpetrator. But everything suddenly changed 9 months after the murder, in a quite unexpected way. In April 2017, a state patrol officer was driving through the town of Worcester, about 18 miles from Princeton. At one point, he spotted a black SUV with a Latino man with short hair behind the wheel. Vanessa's case was well known among the police in the area, so the officer immediately recalled that the driver's appearance and vehicle matched witness descriptions. The patrol officer quickly grabbed a pen and wrote down the license plate number on his hand while the vehicle was still in view. Upon returning to the station, he checked the plate and found that the SUV was registered to a 31-year-old Angelo Ortiz, and he passed this information along to the detectives. Ortiz had no criminal record and had been living in Worcester with his girlfriend and 3 children for less than a year. Officers went to his house to request a DNA sample, but there was a problem. When Ortiz opened the door, they realized he barely spoke English. Fortunately, one of the officers knew Spanish, and Ortiz's girlfriend, who was also home, helped translate for him. During the conversation, Ortiz provided a DNA sample, which was immediately sent to the lab. While waiting for the results, detectives decided to dig deeper into Ortiz's background. They discovered that he worked as a delivery driver, transporting packages from a warehouse to various post offices in the area. This indicated that he knew the area well and frequently visited nearby towns like Princeton. Detectives also requested GPS data from Ortiz's smartphone, and the results were quite intriguing. Although the carrier could only provide approximate data based on cell towers, it showed that Ortiz was in Princeton at the time of Vanessa's attack, specifically in the area where her body was found. Digging deeper, police learned that after the murder, Ortiz made a purchase at a gas station in a neighboring town, just a few miles away. He bought only $5 worth of gasoline, as shown by his bank records. He had filled a small gas can, and, as we recall, traces of gasoline were found on the victim's body. All of this strongly suggested to the detectives that Ortiz was likely involved in the crime. Soon, they received the lab results. His DNA matched the skin particles found under Vanessa's nails. With confirmation of his involvement, the police finally arrested Ortiz. He denied any involvement in the murder, so the case went to court. With the evidence they had, including DNA results and GPS data from the day of the murder, the prosecution was confident they could secure a conviction. However, an unexpected problem arose. When Ortiz hired lawyers, they claimed that the police had obtained his DNA sample illegally, meaning it should be excluded from the evidence. They argued that the language barrier prevented Ortiz from understanding what was happening and from giving consent to the DNA collection. Ortiz insisted that he had signed a document he didn't understand and only provided the DNA sample because his girlfriend told him to do so. This situation posed a major challenge for the prosecution. Even with the undeniable DNA match, the defense's request could have jeopardized the case and led to Ortiz being released. The matter was deliberated for quite some time, but ultimately, the judge decided to uphold the DNA test results. Despite this, Ortiz still refused to confess, and the preparations for the trial dragged on for several years. Throughout this period, Ortiz remained in jail as he was unable to pay the $10 million bail. In total, the wait for the trial lasted over 6 years from the time of the murder, with multiple delays for various reasons. For Vanessa's family, who had already suffered an immense loss, the waiting was extremely painful. During this time, investigators gathered more information that cast Ortiz in an unfavorable light. Though he had lived in the city for less than a year, Ortiz had earned a bad reputation. Several women in his neighborhood told police that they found Ortiz extremely unpleasant. He often made rude, intimate comments about them, and they were afraid to be near him. A former employee of the Princeton post office shared some interesting details. She frequently encountered Ortiz at work because he had been delivering packages. Almost every day, he made inappropriate comments in Spanish about her and another employee, seemingly unaware that she understood the language. She felt very uncomfortable every time he came by and was genuinely afraid of him. Moreover, this woman often walked to work along the same road where Vanessa had jogged. After hearing about Vanessa's death, she could no longer bear to live in the town and moved out. Eventually, the prosecution decided to offer Ortiz a deal, giving him a chance to be released at least in old age. Without the deal, he would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. So after some consideration, Ortiz agreed. and in October 2022, he pled guilty before the judge. As is often the case, the terms of the deal did not require Ortiz to provide any details of his crime. He only needed to admit his guilt, which he did. While the deal might seem unfair, the prosecution secured pretty strict terms. Ortiz was sentenced to 20 years for robbery, as he had taken Vanessa's phone and headphones and received a sentence of 25 years to life with the possibility of parole only after 45 years. This means Ortiz can seek release only after he turns 81. Tragically, Vanessa's father, who had been awaiting justice for his daughter's murder, passed away just 10 days before the sentencing due to health problems. At the trial, his ex-wife stated that he died of a broken heart and unbearable grief caused by the murderer. Ortiz himself showed no signs of remorse or regret during his sentencing. Instead, he asked his lawyer to read a statement on his behalf. The lawyer stated that Ortiz understood why Vanessa's family saw him as a monster. However, he asked them to remember that he is also a person with a family that had supported him throughout the ordeal. He apologized to his own family for the pain he had caused them, but did not apologize to Vanessa's relatives. Ortiz was then sent back to prison, where he remains to this day. After Vanessa's death, her family and friends founded an organization named in her honor. Initially, they focused on offering self-defense courses for women, but over the years, their goals have expanded significantly, and now they work on a wide range of issues related to women's safety and the prevention of violence in all its forms. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.